Well, looking at the clock, I think we're a couple minutes after the hour. So what do you think? Should we get started?
Let's do it.
Awesome. I was thinking I'm supposed to use PowerPoint for today. There we go. So hello, everybody. We're here to present listing input and listing lifecycle and listing management with you today. I'm Jay Pepper Martins.
I'm Vanessa Gamp.
Jody Halderson.
And what are we doing today? I'm going to do a lot of the content, but we're all taking some roles today. Jody, what are you up to today?
I'm going to be moderating questions. So if anybody does have questions, please enter them into the Q&A section. We're not going to be really taking questions from the chat. It's too difficult to monitor both. So please just enter that in the Q&A section. And as we get to the pertinent area, they will be addressed.
And I will try to take a couple of questions in line, but if I feel like the questions are deviating us off into like one or two directions, I might say, we'll take that one at the very end. But if you see really relevant ones that are specific about the slide we're looking at, Jody, I'll try to take one or two when you see them.
Absolutely.
And my, of course, co-presenter today.
Yes. So I'm here for good looks and witty banter.
Also, you happen to be a talented agent and will be offering insight on some of the things that I don't know. As a system engineer and as a person who manages the system, sometimes I don't always have an accurate agent perspective, and that's what I rely on Jody and Vanessa to bring to the table. So between the three of us, we should be able to answer your questions today.
Yes.
So before we get into the content, I thought we'd start by talking about the super regional. And what do we always keep hearing from people? Is it an entirely new system? Like, we hear all kinds of comments.
Yes. Is it a new system? And can we go back to the old one, Jay?
Right. I do hear this, and I understand where the sentiment comes from. The new system is different, but our legacy system had some major problems. It wasn't interoperable with anything else, really. It was super difficult to expand, and it wasn't a comprehensive MLS data set. What I mean by that is, if you looked at all the data in San Francisco, you couldn't see all the listings. Some of them were in other systems, and we never saw them. So this system is a complete data set, and it's optimized and it's interoperable. And we're working more on building those interoperable pieces, which is something we weren't going to put the energy into doing on the old system. Now, I have heard people say, can we just go back, or can we get an entirely different system? And this isn't very realistic. And today we're going to illustrate why. The listing lifecycle is something that makes sense to you the way we do it in Rapatoni, and it's done completely differently in other systems. And so we're going to walk through the listing lifecycle a lot today and go over how it's the same as it was before, and maybe some bits about how it's a little different. But in an entirely new system, the property data types might be completely strange. There'd be missing data. And so it's important that we just focus now on making this system the best system that we can make it. And really, it's already accomplished some pretty crazy goals. We took 7 different MLSs from 3 different technology vendors, and it covers 60,000 agents and 120 million different data points. I'm talking about current listings, historical listings, and every listing has a record of its changes, and we converted all that too. So yes, I'm aware that there are still a few problems with the system. I know that there are bugs, and we're fixing a few things in reports, etc. But I'm happy to report that 95% of the features work 95% of the time. And our uptime is something I'm particularly proud of. Vanessa, have you ever gone to log into the MLS since we went live with Super Regional and it just wasn't there? How many times has that happened to you in the last 9 months?
I was going to say, I think one time in the last 9 months, and I'm pretty sure it was a Rapatoni being down issue.
Very possible. And again, we think that's a huge success story. If you went to the MLS and it wasn't available for an hour or 5, there have been conversions done across North America where they've been down for days, and in some cases weeks, and that didn't happen to us. So even though we know we have some shortcomings here, we still feel like it's majorly a success story. So let's see, what's today? Today is part 2. Yeah, we're right. We did a part 1 a few weeks ago. Today's part 2, which is listing management. And as Jody illustrated, we're going to do some Q&A today. I'll take a few questions in line, but we're going to reserve the bulk of the Q&A for the end. And also at the end, let's take a look at what's coming in part 3 of this series, and I'll go over some other channels that we have available.
Sounds good. Let's jump in.
All right. So I guess if you have an MLS system, it seems like this must be done correctly, this whole listing input business. What do you think?
Yes, I agree.
It's like you can't build good things on top of bad. So if you want to get it right with all of the other activities in the MLS, you have to make sure that the listing data is good quality and entered correctly. But listings being entered is only one of the core skills. The other core skill was part one that I talked about before. If you have not seen part one, searching and managing results, we strongly encourage you to go back and take a look at it. I'll wait while you do that now. No, I'm kidding.
Just kidding.
Kidding. But what you really should do right now, and we'll give you a moment to do it, is in another web browser tab, go to YouTube and look for SFAR Social. And when you find our YouTube page, you're going to find out that all the video content we've been developing for the past 2 months is already available, including our part one of this series. And of course, today's part two will get posted. And once we finish part three, it'll be posted there also.
And Jody, if you could drop that into the chat while we're talking, that would be awesome.
Sweet. Okay. So this is a part that I actually don't know much about, Vanessa. It's the getting the listing. You guys are boots on the street. You guys are actually interacting with clients and you're getting the listing agreement signed. The MLS cares, but we don't really care what you're doing during that activity. But it seems to result in two cases, hey?
Yes. So there's 99% of the time, what most of us agents are doing is a resale listing, meaning we're selling something that has already existed as property in San Francisco. A fraction of the time, there are some of us that specialize in brand new construction. And so that would be the other 1%, the other type of listing that would be entered.
Right. And so what are some general guidelines for these two things? Well, if it's a resale, make sure you're loading data from the tax record. We're going to highlight that today. And we're also going to mention that you should make sure all your material facts are correct. What if the square footage has changed? I mean, there's a way you can override that, right?
I sure hope so.
But there are also some documents you might want to make sure you check before you do that override. And we'll highlight that a little bit today too. But at the end of the day, once you get the data pulled together, you're going to put your listing into the system as coming soon or active. And we're going to talk about that during the life cycle. Now, if it happens to be one of these least common cases, there are system functions that will assist you, and our staff is ready and able to help. Now, we are dealing with some edge cases still with our new system and working through some of the nuances of entirely new structures. So work with us at the MLS team to get your listing entered correctly. And to do that, you'll start off by opening up a ticket in our Fresh Desk system, and then we'll help you through the details. One thing that's pretty cool is we were checking this morning to see if Treasure Island had APNs yet, and the APNs are available now in Realist. So we look forward to those properties selling in 2022, and then shortly after that, some of them will come up for resale.
Yay! A whole new neighborhood. It's exciting.
In San Francisco, unimaginable, right? All right. So from here, let's take a quick moment to talk about what the MLS system is. The MLS system, as I sometimes remark to people, is not a video game system. It is not a fancy thing. It is not an extra reality that is separate from the real reality. What we have an expectation of is that you will help us make sure that the MLS system is an accurate representation of your real world contracts and agreements. And there are a couple of things that really matter.
So I have lots of tips and heard of lots of agents figuring out fancy ways to make things look better online. Are you sure that I can't do that?
I'm pretty sure. In fact, right in the MLS rules and regulations, it'll say if someone says that a listing looks like it's misrepresenting the material facts, we have the right to demand documents, and you are actually required to submit them to us within 3 days. They must be signed. They must be accurate. If they don't match, we're going to issue a violation and we're going to correct the data. So we really do want you to get some very important data points correct. The dates. When you change status, change to the correct status, and please make sure you enter accurate and real date information. The dates should reflect your agreements. And then, of course, the pricing information. I do know that sometimes we'll get a report that the purchase agreement and the price in the MLS don't match. Why might that be, Vanessa?
Well, sometimes there's a credit, or sometimes I myself, an agent, am buying a property personally. So I might waive the commission to make my offer more enticing, and that would change the price.
Interesting. So in that case, would you still record the price accurately so that it reflects what's on the purchase agreement?
Well, I'm a pretty good girl and I follow the rules.
That's
So
right.
I would always put the accurate price into the MLS, but I try and help my fellow agents out. So if I'm putting in something that I know in the real world was adjusted with maybe a sizable credit or a waived commission, I want to put that in so that other agents can use that information in their comp. So I usually write that into the details when I'm closing it.
And I sure hope the MLS system has fields for capturing that information. And I think we'll take a look at those when we get there.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right, so let's talk about the life cycle of a listing. What do I mean? I mean, what happens to a listing number? It gets created at some point. That listing number goes through a period of time, and eventually it gets either closed or it expires. So at the MLS, we have a really strong expectation that your listings will follow this flow. If it deviates from this, you better have some pretty good documentation to support why. So let's just take it from the beginning. You're going to sign that listing agreement. There's probably some activities that happen before you put it in as coming soon. What are some common things? Staging, getting your documents prepared. But eventually, you're going to want to make sure it's in as coming soon if you have a future on market date that's more than a few days. Now, once that period's complete, you're ready to go on the market. You're going to do showings. You're going to do tours. You're going to just start distributing the disclosure packages. Now, what happens during the active status sometimes is you'll hit a snag. And the right thing to do when you hit a snag while you're already on the market, you need to pause the DOM somehow. The correct status is, drum roll, Vanessa.
Hold.
Yeah. And that's going to keep your DOM from accruing. Of course, during the active phase, you're going to do some negotiation. You're going to get offers. Sometimes you're going to get multiple offers, very common in San Francisco. Eventually, you're going to have this thing called an accepted offer, which I don't know much about, but Vanessa does.
Yes.
What happens when you get an accepted offer or you're getting close to one?
So when I have an accepted offer, the key is that I'm looking at the terms of my offer to determine what status I'm going to put into the MLS. So I want to see if it's completely non-contingent, no contingencies in there, or if there are some contingencies that the buyer's written into the contract. So that's going to help me decide whether to go contingent or pending.
Gotcha. There are also some other activities you might do sort of as part of that pending. Then eventually you're going to get through the pending phase. You're going to get to signing and close escrow, and then let's close that listing. That's sort of a normal workflow. Coming soon for the period when you can't bring it to market yet because it's not ready. Repairs, photographs, whatever still being done. Active, held, contingent, or pending, straight to pending. When you hit pending, your days on market will stop, and then you can close the listing when it's ready to be closed.
So Jay, I am pretty proud of how quickly I can sell my listings. And I, in fact, like to market to the public how quickly I can get things into contract. Do I really have to set things as contingent? Can't I just put everything into pending?
Well, you can, but that actually kind of doesn't accurately represent the reality sometimes, right? I mean, going straight to pending, I think I know the strategy. It's to try to get that DOM to stop, to do all those things you just mentioned, keep your numbers down. But really, if you haven't cleared contingencies and those things aren't true, then you're misrepresenting the data. Sometimes if you put it in as pending, but it's actually should be contingent, if someone finds out you're still looking at different offers or something else is going on and they report it to us, we're going to ask you to correct the data. And depending on what's happened, we may demand to see documents. And depending on what those documents say, we may issue a fine.
So that's one of those video game things I should probably not be doing.
That's right. There's a couple of extra statuses in here that are kind of interesting. We'll talk about them. Sold Off MLS is available, and we're going to really dig into that in a moment. But sometimes when you're in contingent or pending, or sometimes even when some of the close activities are starting, something disastrous will happen and the listing will just fall through. We understand the real world is full of edge cases and special conditions. So what are your options? Your options are to either take the listing back into an active status or move it to active and immediately hold it if you don't want to accrue the DOM, or perhaps your listing agreement might just end. Something really awful happened and now there's no listing agreement. But if you're going to put it back in as active and the dates are wrong, you actually need to get something signed, don't you, Vanessa?
I sure hope so.
Yeah, go get yourself an extension. Make sure that the dates are all going to continue, and you're not going to hit your the MLS expiry date or anything like that. That would screw up your listing's life cycle. Now, sometimes people want to just drop it. They want to take it out of the MLS. They want to just wait. The best way to do that is to cancel the listing, which means no listing agreement exists, and then wait 30 days, and then you can bring it back as a brand new listing with the same broker. Now, maybe you've lost the listing entirely and it's changed to another agent and brokerage. Now, that other agent at that other brokerage can bring it in as a brand new listing because it'll be under different representation. There's no wait period.
So did you just say that if I cancel it in the MLS, there's also paperwork I have to do?
That's right. That's exactly right. And I'm going to skip ahead to a fun slide that we've included here where we talk a little bit about the only statuses that start the reset are canceled, expired, and closed. And I'm just going to cancel it in the MLS is not a thing. That is just not permissible. The MLS accurately represents your paperwork. It does not reflect what you want to be a reality. And then you've got separate paperwork that paints a completely different picture. So that's just one of the things we want to make sure people know. Why does listing data matter? Some of the things we've already discussed, including accurate data results in better data later. Stats are more accurate. The picture of the market is more clear. When you're doing CMAs, you're going to get more accurate results. Your productivity and statistics are accurately reported to your brokerage. Your broker probably uses the data feeds that come out of the MLS. And of course, our MLS partners in the NorCal MLS Alliance, they want to exchange good, clean data with us. And so it's our obligation to give them good, clean data in exchange.
Sounds good.
Right. I mentioned Sold Off MLS. There's a couple of cases here, Vanessa. Do you want to take a look at them?
Let's, because this is a new one. It didn't exist before in our old MLS.
That's right. We kind of had a way to represent it. We had this thing where if you wanted it for comp purposes only, we shoehorned some text into the description and we enforced some listing history details. That doesn't exist anymore. Now, if a listing truly does sell off MLS, it's either a coming soon that wasn't meant for distribution yet, but you got an offer, or maybe it was an office exclusive and you did sell it within the office. And so now it needs to be submitted to the service. You'll do that using Sold Off MLS. Of course, where would you make sure that you're withholding the listing if you want to have it as a true office exclusive? You still have to go and fill out the exemption certification in that edge case. This means you're not going to put it, what does the text say? Forgo any type of public marketing defined by the clear cooperation rules. Listings so declared may be subsequently checked, and they do. We've got someone doing that now full time. So please do submit if you think a listing isn't in the MLS and should be because you see it being marketed publicly. We're checking them all now very carefully. I mean, this is worth emphasis, isn't it?
Yes. This is pretty important because we are talking about clear cooperation, which unless you've been living in a cave, hopefully everyone's very familiar with at this point.
And honestly, we've got some statistics that point to this program being quite successful. We know that we've had a lot of listings incoming soon. We see most of them go into an active status at some point in time. We're really excited about the research we're doing on how's it gone for the last 2 years so that we can figure out where we're going. We will probably make some changes to coming soon next year, but we'll do all that based on data and information that's coming to us from NAR and CAR and what our data tells us. We won't do anything crazy. Hold status, the most misunderstood status in the MLS.
It's not easy being hold. No one gets it. Why would I use hold, Jay?
Well, because you want to pause the DOM. So before, when someone said, I'll just cancel it in the MLS, what they actually should be doing is setting it to hold. Hold's going to stop your DOM, but it will not stop the CDOM, which is an important metric that we're using in the database that we also share with our MLS partners, but it never leaves the building. CDOM stays in the house. So you don't have to worry about the CDOM accruing. But what this prevents is someone trying to jump on a listing, sort of a predatory behavior where they'll say, oh, that used to be in the MLS, but now it's not anymore. It looks canceled. Well, maybe I'll try to reach out. Like there's a lot of strange things that go on once a listing truly does fall through. So hold is what you're really looking for. You want to keep it in the MLS. You don't want to show it. You're not really looking for any offers right now. You're maybe fixing something that's wrong with the listing, maybe something that's not right in the disclosure package. So you want to make sure that you use hold status.
If I put a listing into hold, will third-party websites still be able to see it? Like, can someone find it on Zillow or Redfin?
No, so those listings do transfer into an inactive state and they are removed from the feed. But here's the big but always. They already had a copy of the listing when it was active, and they've received a change telling them it's not active anymore. But some of those systems will continue to do their own little, in-house calculations on those listings. And sometimes they will, try to say that this listing is in some off-market or inactive status. So the listing might appear, but it will look a little different. It'll say inactive, it'll say off-market. Also, it's good to note that many of the brokerage data feeds do include the inactive data. So they get sold, they get the helds, they get everything. And we're relying on our broker partners to behave ethically and responsibly with that data. And if we find someone out of compliance, we have a conversation with them about that. Good question. Just to recap, the only 3 statuses that will start the 30-day reset timer, the magical thing to get your 0 DOM and C DOM again. Canceled, there's no listing agreement. Expired, there's no listing agreement. Closed, that listing's sold. 30 days later, that's probably going to be represented by someone else if they wanted to sell it in 3 months. I can't imagine why, but if they did, the listing would come back as brand spanking new. So we talked a little bit about the strategy of I'm just going to cancel it in the MLS. And we decided the answer was
Cannot do that. So we're either holding it in the MLS or we're canceling it in the MLS and canceling our listing agreement and writing a brand new one.
That's right. And a strategy that is valid is cancel the current listing agreement, sign a new one that afternoon, and just predict to come on the market in 30 days. Go active on day 31. And maybe during that time, you don't want to talk about the listing, so you don't have to put it anywhere. But if you decide you're going to start marketing it immediately, 2 days later, what can you do? Put it in as coming soon. You could definitely re-enter the listing as coming soon a few days after that if you have to. And that is one way you can put the listing back in. Especially make sure you do that if you're going to start talking about the listing to people outside of your office.
Right.
All right. So we're open again. COVID's sort of over, mostly over. We've got some new procedures, but we're all doing them. We're all being responsible. But the long and the short of it is that open houses are back on the menu, and so is broker tour. So how do you get the right data? How do you make sure you're using the data correctly? And how do you find the data for the listings that came to us from outside? Well, when you're doing an open house, you have some options. You can do in-person, sometimes called traditional, or you can do virtual. If you choose to do in-person, there should be no URLs added anywhere, but the comments do permit you to put a URL in it. Just a little tip. However, if you switch this to being virtual, you suddenly get the ability to put in link URLs where you will virtually tour. You can specify the time that you intend to do this. Maybe it's going to be a live, right? You're going to use Facebook Live. You're going to use some kind of a streaming mechanism where people can sign on to your live stream. So this is where you would put that link URL information, and you'd still want to specify your start time and end time for virtual.
Great.
What about broker tours? Vanessa, did you know that we actually have the ability to pull now the data for listings in the city that were entered by the reciprocal agents?
I did. I'm pretty sure I saw it on a video somewhere.
You did? Okay, fantastic. That means you've been checking out YouTube. If you haven't already gone to the YouTube channel and subscribe, make sure you click the subscribe button. Yes, and the broker tour report addendum is something that we very prominently display as available on Mondays in the afternoon. And that's got that has all the data aggregated from our MLS partners who have listings that are inside the city. Point of confusion here, people sometimes wonder what they have to do with their listing that's outside the city. And why don't we talk about that when we dig into the actual listing input?
Okay, but on Tuesdays, I can run my tour sheet the way I normally do.
Yep.
And I'm also going to click on that banner on the top of MLS that will give me the addendum to the tour sheet, correct?
Right on.
Awesome. And with those two combined, I have the full accurate San Francisco Tuesday tour.
That's right. We apologize for the threading of the extra data right now that you have to kind of do manually. Rest assured, we're working on making a permanent change where that data will be pulled right into your native report.
Great.
And, We actually think we've moved that ball ahead just recently. Originally, I was concerned this might take until Q2 next year, but now it looks like we're going to get it sooner than that. So that was just a piece of good news that we got earlier this
Yay.
week.
Sooner is always better.
Always. Well, it looks like it's time to actually dig into some listings. Should we do that?
Let's please.
Cool. All right. So what I've got here is I'm logged into the staging environment for the MLS system. This means I can do some pretty wild things. I can like delete stuff and do all kinds of things that would be destructive with data. So if you see me doing something here, you're like, oh, he's changing data in production. I'm in a staging website so that I have some flexibility with like editing listings and stuff. But because I'm in my staging environment, some of the pages might be slow to load. So just a heads up that we're going to move as quickly as we can, but we might get stuck in a couple places. Okay.
Sounds good.
So the first thing we were going to look at was when you start a listing, we wanted to talk about property types. Vanessa, what are some confusing areas of property type? What should I look at if we're going to start a brand new listing?
So obviously we're always going to pick our San Francisco County if the listing is here in San Francisco.
Okay, now I get this new page, and what are some confusions here? I think we know a few things agents get wrong a lot, don't we?
Right. So there is 2 houses on 1 lot, or ADU, or residential. If I just want to load a single family house, I don't see it in this list. Which one should I be picking?
Right. The global property type for a home that a family would move into, so a single family residence for all intents and purposes, whether it's a condo or a co-op unit or a residential home that's standalone with nothing attached, those are residential. If you are marketing a property that literally has 2 or more units in it, as many as 50, 80, 100, a whole building, residential income is where you would market that. And the 2 to 4 units need some special care, some tender care. And the 5+ seem more like commercial. There, of course, are also rules that let you put it in as a duplicate. So if you go review the MLS rules and regulations, you'll see that there are some edge cases where you can put things in as 2 different listings. We won't talk about that a lot today because that's really specific stuff. But just be aware that the 2 that you're going to use most commonly are residential and residential income, where you're setting it up as a 2, 3, 4 unit, maybe mixed use.
Got it.
Today, we're going to talk about the residential. And the most important thing to do after you choose residential is this. The next step.
Is that the tax records?
Right, it is. Now, what's confusing about the way our listing input screen starts is that there's also an APN set of fields with this get address hyperlink, which will try to sort of take what you've given as an APN, figure out maybe if you've done some formatting wrong, and it runs it against a bunch of APN databases. It's actually prone to error. And even though it's supported, the correct thing to do is to click Search County Records to load the realist tax data search. And why don't we create a listing today? I'm going to create one on 311 Grove. It's right beside the office there on Grove Street. And I want to provide enough information so that realist doesn't die on me when it's looking to find the data. So I happen to know that our area zip code there is 94102. So with that basic information, I should be able to find an APN for that. And I can. Great.
Ta-da!
When you're here, what you want to do is either put a checkbox in and click select, but really if you just click select, it's always going to accept that value. What it will do right now auto-magically is it will continue to fill in the data. So now the address information has been broken into its parts correctly. And the next steps will all happen in a very nice, elegant way. Place pin on map, we'll zoom in. Come on, zoom in. There we go. Like I said, staging, sometimes a little bit of lag. Now that we're on the right area, we can continue to listing input. My satellite didn't freeze. I'm just waiting for staging.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so here we are now in the listing editor. Most of you have seen this before. And boy, is it long.
So long. So many new things to enter in here.
I'm not even to the bottom yet. There, I finally hit the bottom. That is a headache.
So there's no way I'm filling out all of this, just so you know, Jay. It was very nice of you to create all of these fields for me, but there's no way that I'm doing that.
Right. So what did I actually need you to complete? there's a handy little control right up here in the top left corner under listing information residential. It's called the field selector, and you can go and select the required only, and it just collapsed everything down to what you have to enter in order to post. So once you fill in these fields that are highlighted in red, you're ready to post it. I mean, of course, you're going to want to expand it again and fill in some sections that make sense. But this is your shortcut to seeing that it's only 1, 2, about 3 pages of fields on your web browser. Not terrible.
That is way easier. And also, this is a super great time saver, so I can be sure that I'm not missing any required fields, so I'm not scrolling back through everything later.
Yeah, the way it does that is kind of annoying. Hey, if you have the whole form and you miss one, you click submit, and then it like scrolls it to the top and puts a thing with bullet points at the top, and you got to like click around to get back to where you were trying to go. This strategy will help you save all that agony.
I'm going to use that pull down on the left for required fields all the time now. Learned a new trick. Thank you.
Yep. When I'm on all fields, maybe I know that I need to find the place somewhere on the form that's about parking, but I don't know where it is. Is it halfway down? Is it 3/4? Well, in a web browser, if you're on a Mac, you're going to use your Mac key, F. If you're on a Windows computer, you'll use Control F, and it's going to open up a little search dialog. So can you see up in the top corner here that it looks like Chrome has created it in the top corner. Firefox puts it in the bottom left. I think some of the web browsers pop it open in the middle now, like new versions of Safari, depending on what plugins you're using. So this can be used to find what you need to find really, really quickly. Check it out. So I've got my find dialog open. I'm highlighted on the page. And as I type, the web browser is trying to highlight on the page where that field is. And it found the first one, happens to be a parking accessibility feature. That's not what I want.
No.
I'm going to go down arrow. Parking information, helpful. But where are the settings? Click again, and I'm only brought to the top. Well, what's that all about? Maybe what I'm looking for is something about parking features. What if I only call it park? Do I find more? And it turns out that I can't see all of the data. Well, what if I put in the number of parking spaces is greater than 0?
It magically appeared.
It magically appeared. So by putting in a non-zero value in parking spaces, now I'm able to pick parking features. And there are a few other places in the MLS that behave this way. It's done as a convenience so that you don't have to fill in a required parking features block if you put 0, because what would you choose? So you'll find that the MLS works like this in a few places.
Great.
That's a really handy tip. Let's go back and talk about the 2 HSLs and the ADUs and what's the diff.
Please. I get that question a lot. ADUs are starting to become more popular, but I don't know how to put them in properly so that people can find them.
So in the cases where there are 2 front doors, they each have separate numbers. Like, you know, some listings in San Francisco have like a number range, but there really is 2 different front doors. Well, that could in fact be a case where it's a 2 HSL. Sometimes the 2 buildings are completely detached and they're not related at all. They just happen to be on the same APN. This happens a lot outside of San Francisco, a little less so in the city, but there are some. But there are also cases where it's definitely a single family residence, but there's also this little cottage thing in the back. Sometimes it's attached and it's got its own little door, but you got to walk through the yard. Sometimes you have to go through one of those little narrow contractor entrance spaces, and you get to the back and there's a door. So in those cases, it might be an accessory dwelling unit. And the MLS is designed to be as accurate, but also as flexible as possible. And if you're confused about what your case should be with your, either it's a 2 doors or maybe it's a door in the back, or it's hard to figure out what it should be, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We've been doing a lot of research lately on 2 houses on lot and ADUs, and we're ready to help you. So if you put in an email ticket to us, maybe put it in earlier than like the day you need to get the listing submitted. Put it into us as an email ticket. We'll open it up in Freshdesk. We'll help you with a little analysis and we'll get back to you because we want to help you get it right. We also want to be as flexible as possible with the goal of being as accurate as we can be. Does that make sense?
It does. Sounds good to me.
So in this case, let's say we do have a single family residence. It's sort of a typical one in San Francisco where it's attached to the buildings that are beside it. Maybe a couple of the other subtype pieces of information matter, and you would check all those that apply. You can check many. So I'm just going to show you here. I can check many boxes. I'm just being arbitrary what I'm choosing. So you can check a lot, right? And there is a limit. So up to 6 entries are allowed. If I tried to pick any more, it's going to force me to choose some to deselect. So in this case, I'm only going to select the one that I know to be true, which is that it's attached. We'd fill in all the listing price, the on-market date information. All of this should match your agreements. Your listing price, when you bring it on the market, should match what your listing agreement says you're going to bring it on the market at. All the rest of the data information, please make sure it matches your documentation. One of the things that's really great now is we finally squashed the bugs with district and sub-district. And so now we're able to make sure that every listing in the city gets a correct district and sub assigned to it.
Hooray!
Yeah, things that are required but don't auto-populate. Cross street, you have to fill that in yourself in almost all cases. Now we're going to talk more about these publish to internet and show and all these fields in part 3. Originally today we were hoping to also talk about listing distribution, but there's so much content. We're already almost, I think, halfway through today, and we're not quite done the content yet. So we're going to deal with this when we talk about prospect management in a few weeks. December the 2nd is when that part 3 will be. So come check it out. Okay.
Sounds good.
Now let's scroll back up here and look at square footage. You know what? I don't know where that is on the form. So I'm going to use my handy dandy search trick. There I go. And look what happened. My tax record had a 0 in it.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. So now we're going to have to make some decisions. How am I going to decide what to put here, Vanessa?
So there is a couple of things that you can do when the square footage is inaccurate or wrong. So obviously we've all seen a 0 square footage situation. When you come to that, you can change what the number is so long as you have a source that you share in the MLS for where you're getting this number from. So an appraiser, perhaps you have a graphic artist who is measured and drawn for you, or you even have plans. If you did a major remodel and you have all the architectural drawings and you know the square footage, whatever the documentation that you're using, you just need to select that as the source, and then you can override what the tax records say.
Fantastic. Make sure you have your supporting documentation was my takeaway from that. Don't report something to the MLS that you wouldn't be able to substantiate, I guess is
correct.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll make sure I do that. Now, my year built source also didn't load, and it's got a similar set of fields, a little bit shorter. It's got fewer options. And the lot size source, again, the same thing. It's the long, same as the square foot source. The lot size source could follow any of those things Vanessa mentioned.
Correct.
In this case, because I'm using the architect diagrams for this building, for this nice 1255 multi-floor thing that we're going to move into, excuse me, I also need to make sure I specify the number of bedrooms. I need to specify the number of bathrooms. Again, make sure that this matches. Your total of full baths plus partial bathrooms will result in a field called total bathrooms, which downstream from us is taken by data feed consumers, your brokerage system, the web systems for public display sites, that sort of thing. So don't include the partial bathrooms in your full baths. Break those two numbers out. And then the total is not something you enter. The total is something that's for you downstream. And as I promised, here's my fancy stuff on ADU second unit. We decided that this example would be one where it is. I'm going to choose yes. And as soon as I did that, you didn't get to see it. But what happened further down the screen is now there's another set of fields that became available called second unit information. And notice how they all just became required.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So the other way you could have solved that was I chose ADU yes. Find my square footage again. Okay. So I chose ADU second unit yes. And then I'm going to go and choose required fields only. And now I barely need to scroll down at all. And it's going to be right down, bang. There's all the required fields for second unit. So two ways you can slice that up. You can use that fancy Control F trick, the Command F trick that I just showed you, or you can flip it to your required onlys and then navigate very fast.
Perfect.
So again, the system can help you go faster. You just have to kind of take a few minutes to learn some of the nuances of how to really navigate the thing like a super pro. Other required fields, I'd have to fill in my special listing conditions. A very common one in here is my, where is it? Short sales, real estate owned. These were very common about a decade ago. They're less common now, but make sure you look through here and check off anything that makes sense. Now, how do I check off nothing? We have a checkbox in here to handle that one because it's a required field. It's called none. You will usually find that a none or an undefined value will be allowed to be submitted if it's a large set of values like this, where we require you to pick one. You have to affirmatively declare that there are no special listing conditions. That's why that's there.
Got it.
All right, so we talked about the square foot. Maybe let's talk about private remarks for a second, Vanessa. Do you use private remarks on all your listings?
Absolutely. This is where I can give my fellow agents some details and information that maybe I don't want the general public to see.
Right on. And it's quite long now. It used to be limited to about 500 characters. Now we let you go right up to 1,300, and that's common across the entire NorCal MLS Alliance. So you can be rest assured that if you put up to 1,000 or 1,300 characters in these two remarks fields, they are being accurately transmitted to the other systems. Any instance we can find where that doesn't happen, maybe it was an older listing that got truncated at some point in time. So if you find one where it's maybe one of your historical listings or a current one where it's not working right, open up a ticket with us using Freshdesk so that we can look into it and help you solve it.
Okay.
There are some other things you can put in here. What if you have disclosure links, but you don't use disclosures IO? Where could you put that, Vanessa?
Hopefully you're going to be putting that in the private remarks where URLs are allowed to go.
And there are a couple of other features that agents like to take advantage of in applications. What are some other ones that you might put a URL for? I'm not an agent, so.
Oh, so Calendly is pretty common as well if you're using it for a booking system.
Yep, totally okay.
And then property websites. So agents will do a custom property website, and you can also stick that in agent remarks.
That's right. And putting it there doesn't mean you wouldn't put it in the virtual media. You would also put it in virtual media, but you're permitted to put it here, and that's okay. So a second ago, we were talking about parking. I think that's worth going through in detail. We've got some rules around parking now. So why don't we really dig into parking? It's like a premium thing in San Francisco.
Yes, it is. And I want to make sure I can always advertise my parking.
But sometimes you want to advertise parking, Vanessa, but there's no real parking. So what are some common no-nos that we have to be on the alert for?
Well, if a building, let's say I have a condo listing and the building has no parking whatsoever, there's no garage or parking in the building, but across the street is a very large parking garage and I have leased parking across the street. Can't I advertise that in the MLS here?
Well, the problem is that leased parking space that you've obtained in a separate building on a different APN isn't actually anywhere in your deed. It's not anywhere in the CC&Rs. So because there's no supporting information that declares that there's a parking space affirmatively associated with this residence, I'm going to have to say no, Vanessa, you better not do that. I'm going to send you a violation. You don't mind if I do?
I can only advertise leased parking if it is showing up in the title report, as in I'm leasing it from within the building that the unit is in?
That's right. It really has to be supported by some documentation that's associated with the property. And there might be some really exotic edge case we're not discussing today. And before you put in a 1 and take a guess, what would you recommend people do?
If they have a question, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm definitely going to be emailing the MLS to ask them.
Right on. We'll get a ticket started. We'll find out if there's some edge case or special condition regarding the parking, and we'll help you get it right. Okay. Is there any interesting questions that are related to the parking information? I feel like this one's so important that I'd like to take questions in line if we have any.
So I just saw that Lori asked if we can mention it in the agent remarks if there is leased parking elsewhere. And I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, you most certainly can.
That's a great idea. Because if you put it in the private remarks, it's going to be seen by the other agents, but where will it not be displayed? To members of the public, if they're seeing it on a public portal. It also won't be shown to members who are working with an agent from another reciprocal MLS. Only the agent will know that there's an option here to explore, and they can factor that into their offer writing.
Correct.
That's a great question.
And that way you are being sure to display your listing as accurate, meaning that you're not selling it with parking that is included in the title, but that you have found parking in the neighborhood and secured it if the new buyer would like to take over that parking lease.
Right
So
on.
Jay, we have a couple of questions that have come up in regard to, for some condo buildings that have leased parking, it will not show in the prelim, but there will be a leased parking agreement that is part of the HOA documents.
Ah, it's in the HOA documents. That sounds like something you can substantiate. Would you say, Vanessa?
Yep, I've got documents to prove I've got parking in the building.
Now, that document might also have a price associated with it. So it's on the site, but it requires you to sign a lease, and maybe there's fees, I'm guessing.
Yep.
Let's do that as an example. So imagining that I'm editing a condo right here, I would choose on-site lease available. And as soon as I did that, it wants to know what's the term. It also wants to know if there's any fees. You have to affirmatively declare that it either is included or that there is a cost. As soon as I say cost, there's a number. I have to say that I have to pay $111. And what's the access to this parking? Well, it's independent because it's a space I can pull into. It is not hours limited. Oh, I also had to do my term. So maybe it's month to month. And bang, there you go. That's how you would do it.
Awesome.
And then we had a second question that was more focused towards the penalty. What
Ooh.
is the penalty for misrepresenting the parking situation?
So instead of going through the penalties, I'm going to direct you to a really critical resource. Underneath links and documents, it's really important that you take a look at the SFAR rules and regulations from time to time. We publish these frequently. We make changes that are dictated to us by our state and our national rules bodies, and we make tweaks on our own based on work that's being done at the committee level. So just jumping into the rules for a second, let's see, they were published on 2021-9/15, very new copy. Let's see if parking's in here anywhere. Looks like it is, specifying parking in the MLS. And so what I would recommend is for everyone who's got questions about parking and if you should include it and what the penalties could be, please go and read section 727, and I'll let you do that on your own. Should we move on?
I think we're good.
We're looking good? Okay, great. Okay, so.
Oh, sorry, Jody, you're on mute, but it looks like there's one more question.
Sorry, I muted myself. There was one more question that I just noticed in regard to parking. And it was, can you add the outside leased parking into the public remarks?
I don't recommend it. And the reason I don't recommend it is now you're transmitting to members of the public that there is some notion of included parking. I mean, I guess you can, because the public remarks can contain anything relevant about the property, but now you're talking about something that's opportunistic maybe, or it's, you have no way to guarantee that it's available. I think it's risky. What do you think, Vanessa?
I think it's risky. And if you're going to do it, I would recommend speaking with your sales manager first on the appropriate wording you should use so that you don't end up in a sticky situation or worst case scenario, a lawsuit where you have to make up a magical parking spot that might not exist.
That sounds pretty hard to do in San Francisco.
Yes.
I think, Jay, a little bit of background on this is really important when it comes to historical data, because at one point it may show that leased parking was included and that lent itself to a potentially higher sales price.
Right.
Somebody goes to sell the property down the line, that parking is no longer included. And so you're left with this apples to oranges comparison, really.
And that goes back to speaking about the accurate data. If we don't make this system as accurate as possible, and if you find any instances where the data is not quite right, email us. We'll try and correct it as best we can, as fast as we possibly can. But yeah, to your point, accurate data means later on your job's going to be easier and it's going to make sense. The comparisons you do is going to be better.
All right.
Cool. So I'm going to move on to the revised menu in general. So imagining that we, finished off this listing. Now we've got listings submitted. I'm just going to jump to my Noe Valley search and get into an existing listing we can revise that's already sort of gone through the coming soon phase and it's active now. So let's see if we can get some results here. Okay, my results for Noe Valley are coming up. This is my listing here on 42, 48, 25th. So I'm going to click the pencil to get into the revised menu. And let's just talk about some of the things that are in here. Obviously, the listing information page we've just gone through extensively. The status information is the menu that you will use when this active listing is ready to go into contingent. This is where you'll come and put in the contingent no show. Please, now the contingent date is required. It flipped to red. Please accurately represent all the material facts of the dates that are required. And of course, you can see a number of fields are disabled. You don't need to fill them out with contingent no show, but we do need to fill this out. And I'm going to click the little calendar. I'm going to say it's contingent as of today. I'm going to save it. It's going to warn me if I'm making changes that are illegal or not valid in the database sense, but it looks like it's good. So it's going to take me back to my revised menu. That's how I know it succeeded. So when I now need to transition this to pending, same thing, go into the status information. Now we're going to be pending. We're following a normal workflow. And now all of a sudden I have to provide the pending date. And it will let me put in today as the pending date. I think this will let me have these dates match. I think in some instances it wants you to offset them. No, it was fine. So now I've got my fancy pending listing, and it's going to go through all those pending things that it's got to get done. You're waiting for all those any other limits to be withdrawn, and everything else to clear, so that you can finally get it to close. And now the only options that were available, I don't know if you noticed, but under the listing information, it's dramatically less. And the only thing you should be doing now.
Battery low.
So one of us.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. So then I'll move to closed. And now I have a lot of information I have to enter. The IDs of the offices for the buying side all became required. Any concessions, I have to affirmatively declare that there were none if there are none. But to Vanessa's point earlier, you might put some information here if there's something relevant to report.
And it's really handy that there is a specialized area for it now. So it's not just something that you're writing in, but you can put into the concessions tab there.
So let's imagine that it was some, I don't know why, but maybe it's like some $50,000 concession. I don't know if that's realistic, but so now you've got this huge concession that could actually take this listing, make it an outlier. So someone runs everything that's in this district. And here's this one that's like, what? Why is it like low? Really low.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some options you could do when you see this in the grid?
So if you see it in the grid, typically you would need to click into the listing in order to read the information about it. And if you're just looking at numbers and everything's lining up, you might not notice it. But if you, like you said, if something is sticking out as really over or underpriced compared to most of the comps, you can click onto it and read to see if there's any details. Often agents will put things in the agents only section in addition to the comments for closing. And now that we have this new concessions area, they can put dollar amount details in there as well.
And we allow quite a few characters. I mean, if you need to write a novel, I mean, just try to keep it to be a brief one. Maybe it's a novella. You've got some space here to use. We encourage you to use it. And the other one, of course, the buyer financing, there's a comment space here. If there's something that needs to be recorded that will make sense to everyone looking at this listing later, just make a note of that.
Perfect.
Okay, so I've also got on here some discussion about the NorCal Alliance, which we'll jump into, but there was a question that we got from the audience at the very beginning about incompletes. So if you have incomplete listings, they'll be available under your incomplete menu. And this user that I'm using on my staging environment might not have any, but we'll go take a look. So this agent doesn't have any incompletes. If there were incompletes here, you can go in and edit them and revise them and no one sees them except for staff. So if I was logged in as a staff account, I'd be able to browse a special menu, this top secret menu, where I can find all the incompletes. I can search them by member number. So if you have something going on with your listing and you need some help before you can press that magic submit button, make sure you fill in the incomplete the way you think it should be completed, and then reach out to us via email and ask us for help. We're happy to take a look at your incomplete listing with you, and we can provide some guidance on things that are just database field settings, or how to lay out your 2 houses on lot versus your ADU. We can help you get that right before you press the submit button.
And then, Jay, can you quickly show us where it is that we would save a listing? Say we're working on it, we get called away from our desk. How do we even make a listing go incomplete instead of go live?
Okay, so when you're in this editor, let's see if it manages to find, no, it didn't. So I'll just quickly blast through it. Sometimes it will say, do you want to restore the one you were working on? I mean, that's just the system trying to help you. But in this case, maybe I'm lucky. I'll try it here. There we go. I'm glad I went back to the other tab. So this tab of the MLS recognized that I had started something. Now this isn't going to work if you like leave for a day and your computer reboots. So this only saves you if you accidentally closed the page or went to a different spot in the MLS and I forgot and I'd already done a bunch of work. I'm going to say, okay, it's going to redo all the work I had done up till now.
That's a nice time saver.
Yep. And like I said, it will save you in the edge cases where you didn't leave for a day, you didn't reboot the computer, and you didn't totally close the browser. So it's behaving very slow here today. Okay, it looks like it failed. So in staging, this didn't work, unfortunately, but you will see that occasionally. Let's dig into it here. You know what? I don't even need the city if I use the zip code, no time saver. Great. Zoink. Okay, so now I'm in my listing input editor, and just like you said, Vanessa, phone rings, right? Client walks in, or a lot of us are working from home now. The water heater explodes, or contractor shows up. I need to save my work. How do I do that? So at the top, one of your options is a large button called Save as Incomplete and Exit.
Gotcha.
That's going to be pause my work, and now it's saving. Believe you me, it's saving. Okay, then I go do something else, right? I go back to my home page, I talk to my client, I do something, I change my environment, whatever. Oh no, I need to resume. I go to incomplete listings. There's my listing. I can go straight to
Ta-da!
Magic. And now that I've started my incomplete again, you can't put it on tour, right? You can't schedule it for an open house. It's incomplete. But what I can do is I can get back into listing information, fill out the rest of the required fields, upload a couple of photos, and then I'm off to the races.
Perfect. And I know the first thing I'll be doing after returning to an incomplete listing, because I probably forgot what I have or haven't done, is using the required fields only button to double check my work so that I can actually publish this now that I'm ready.
Right on. And once you get those filled in, you can then unrequired fields, go back to the all, go in and put a couple of the ones in that are really important to you to get it ready for either coming soon or active.
Great.
Cool.
All right.
Let's see, we covered.
So I think we might have covered everything. Do you think it's time for some questions, Jay?
I think so. I'm going to flip back to the presentation and I'm going to show you one diagram before we start questions. So fire up your questions while I'm going through this. This is a picture of the new NorCal MLS Alliance. And how do you fit into it? Well, in the top right corner, you'll see that the SFARMLS logo is there. We use this technology called RESFAR, Real Estate SFAR, which is part of the Real Estate California project by Rapatoni. We have two partners in that, our RE Barry's MLS, and Metrolist partners. We all use a common technology from Rapatoni. And we use that system to exchange data completely automatically with the Paragon system that covers the MLSs of the East Bay, represented in blue, and to cover the MLS listings territory, which is south of us, for the rest of the peninsula and a little bit further down. And that's MLS listings that covers that territory in green. So with this system, we've taken away the need to enter it in multiple places. I mean, I know it seems like there are some headaches with the system, and I completely understand that. But what you used to have to do was incredibly brutal. You used to have to put the listing in 2 or 3 places. If you took a listing in Marin, you had to put it in our system for our members to see it. You wouldn't put it in Barry's. Maybe you also put it in Paragon because, a lot of some of the agents working in that area will also look in Marin. And then the listings in the city, sometimes an agent wouldn't put one in the city. And so you had to go look in 4 or 5 places. We had a search database that we had created called Quattro, but nobody really understood how to use it. Everything was a nightmare. This system, even with its flaws, is inherently superior. You put the listing in one place and then everything else is magic. I mean, really
Nothing better than magic.
Yeah. It's engineering brutal, hard to do magic, but hey, whatever. We'll fix all the bugs and we'll get it all worked out as we go forward. All right, let's open it up.
So we have two questions. One is going to be, how long can a listing be in the coming soon status?
Ooh, good question. So we are actually talking with this at the committee level right now, but today the facts haven't changed from when we introduced it. What is the limit right now?
So right now you can keep a listing in coming soon as long as your listing agreement is valid. So if you have a listing agreement that's 3 months long, then your listing can remain in coming soon for all 3 of those months. We do not have a limit aside from your documentation, your paperwork, your listing agreement.
And it seems interesting that we keep coming back to that listing agreement documentation, don't we? So your limitations aren't driven by some magic rule that Jay crafted with the MLS committee in secret somewhere. It's driven by your listing agreement. If your listing agreement is going to expire on December 31st, well, your last day of coming soon is December 30th. The 31st would then be when your listing expires.
Right.
Good question.
Okay, and the next question is about saving listings. So when somebody has not used the incomplete option and has just saved the listing, and you look at the listing history and there are several saved sessions and it looks very cluttered, how do you go about deleting those multiple saved lines?
Yeah, this is another fascinating thing where you don't have the ability to hide those erroneous, call them event log items. We do as staff. We have a mechanism by which we can go in and we can click hide, 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 as long as we're not misrepresenting anything that's changed. We're not hiding a material fact change. So if you get yourself into a state where you accidentally submitted it and you need to clean up some of that history, your answer is to email the MLS team and just say, hey, I took a screenshot of my history. I think I should get you to remove some of these. And if they're appropriate to remove, we can hide them for you.
All right, next, Jay, how do you pull the broker tour from the MLS in San Francisco and also other areas like Marin?
Yes, this is going to be tricky, but I'm going to show you. So right now it's not super elegant, but it does work. I'm going to go under listings. I'm going to go under tours. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
good. And when I go to tours, of course, my first place to go is SFAR, and then I can pull the one for the city, but that's not the question. The question is, I want to look at the data for somewhere else. And the answer is, all of these links drive you to a search dialog called Tour Caravan Outside SF Search. So this requires you to have some knowledgeable information about when those tours are, or you're not going to be able to find data. Earlier today, when we were rehearsing, we looked at a document, and I think it makes sense to take a look at it. What were we trying to figure out? This exact thing, sort of. Hey, Vanessa?
Yes. So when we were talking about it, we were looking up if we wanted to place a new listing that was not in San Francisco on tour, how would we find the tour times in another city or county?
So to do that, under the links and documents menu, you can get to this handy page, which has phenomenal resources on it. One of them is a document that tells you all the times and the dates that the outside MLSs have their tour. I love that I, clicked on all those things, and then by clicking one more time, it reset my view. That was really lovely. I love that. Okay.
So what you clicked on was the Bay Area broker tour link.
That's right.
Okay.
And now I need to use this zoom control here. Okay, there we go. All right. So now that I've got the document pulled up, I can look at, maybe it's Alameda. So if I look for Alameda, and I'm sure enough, I'm going to use my little search the web browser trick again. I use that so frequently. Like, this can really save your bacon if you need to find things quickly on web pages. Okay, so there I am. There's Alameda. Okay, cool. So Alameda is going to be every Tuesday, and it looks like the times are going to be between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. So let's see. I've now got that search up. I want to search in Alameda. So let's see, let's pull up a calendar. I'm going to search. I'm going to open up my search to be from the 8th to the 10th to make sure I don't miss anything for next week. So now I've got that Tuesday covered. I'm going to start it at, sure, let's start it at noon. But it said some of it starts at 11 a.m. So maybe what I really want here is something like 8 a.m.
I think it said 10 to 1, but yes, 8 a.m. will be there.
Let's go to midnight, and I want to look for just the residentials, please. And by cleaning up these other checkboxes, and we're looking for anything that's active. I don't know if they put their coming soons on tour, but let's check. And so right now, when I go view, I'm only able to pull back 1 or 2 records. It looks like a lot of the data hasn't been input yet. And you know what? That makes sense. It probably means that they haven't input their data yet. Like us, they're going to be inputting their tour data a day or 2 before. So once you get into this search, you're going to try to search for in the areas you want on the dates that you care about based on what you know to be true from the documentation we've provided. And then you'll be able to find it. And you can really get crazy in here and refine it. Like only show me the listings that are on their tour that have 3 bedrooms. Do any of that until you get result sets back. Once you've got some results you can evaluate, then you can really dig in. Oh, also, I'm on the staging site right now, so I'm not getting live data from the other MLSs, which is why I'm only getting a couple of tour records. These are the test data records I'm seeing.
Gotcha. So there's more than one house in all of Alameda on tour. Good,
yeah, Alameda
good to know.
Yeah, but in staging, we only have 1 test record.
Got it.
So hopefully that answers that question. Does that member have a follow-up question, or did I nail it?
I think that covered it. There were, what is the deadline to enter?
Great. So outside of our system, the deadline depends on those systems, and they kind of seem like they change a little, and it depends on how those systems work. Our deadlines are noon on Monday for anything that you're going to show on Tuesday, noon on Tuesday for anything in 9 DF GHI, which is what shows on Wednesday still. And we're going to be promoting Wednesday's broker tour into 2022. We've got some active work we're doing right now on making all that better. We know there's some shortcomings. We're working on it. Hopefully
perfect. So as long as you remember noon the day before the tour, then you'll always be okay in San Francisco.
100%.
Great.
There was another question that is kind of basically a subset of, as you change the listing information or the status information rather, is the East Bay MLS does capture the number of offers that have been submitted on a property. Are we going to implement something like that?
We're not. Until the MLS committee discusses it and figures out a reason why that makes sense in the city, we're not planning to capture it. Now, their system has that information and will transmit it to us. I do think there's a way to surface it for East Bay data if you want to look at that information. But that's one of the ones where I would ask that member to send us an email so that we can answer that question accurately and get back to them through Freshdesk.
Okay.
I've also got some information here about some upcoming presentations. Why don't we jump to that information?
Perfect.
Great. So previously on, I think it was September 20-somethingth, the 3 of us got together and we did the searching and managing search results in San Francisco. Today we did Super Regional Part 2, listing entry for the city and how to look at open houses and broker tours. And then we'll do one more of these webinar style on December the 2nd, and that's going to be prospects, how to use them. And we'll also cover listing data distribution in that presentation because obviously you can see we're already, I think, over time. So we'll hit that up in part 3. We've also got a new series for You Ask, We Answer, where we're taking the questions, we're getting an email, and we're making short 3-minute answer videos for those. There's a couple of those posted already. So please go check those out. And then, of course, I mentioned part 3. The registration for that will be available soon. It's not quite yet, but when the registration is available, it'll be on the events page. And maybe if Genevieve or someone can put the link to where the events page is on the member site, good idea to always plug into that events page from time to time and check out what we've got coming out. And of course, I did mention YouTube, I think once or twice. We are really focusing on getting video content to you. That's really awesome. And there's more than just MLS video content here. Stuff about the welcome home, president's messages. We had a really cool one about someone talking about DBI And so her name was Allie, and we recorded that, and that's available for you to check out. It's a really cool video, and I highly recommend it. We had some stats from a guy from realtor.com that he came and presented for about 12 minutes, and it's a really short, super informative video. Recommend you hit YouTube and check it all out.
Awesome. All right. Well, we covered a very robust amount of information today. Hopefully all of you guys learned some new tricks or got clarification on the rules for your listings and your listing entry. And we're looking forward to seeing you back on part 3.